All right, we have made it to the end. Friday, happy Friday, everybody. Man, uh, this has been a lot. This has been a good exercise in putting all this out, one episode each day. Definitely won't be the norm, but I figured this would be the best way to space it out and kind of build a little bit into each one. So here we are, end of the week. Phase number 3, the decision making stage, where you put all of your evaluation skills to the test. Drink of the episode, just for right now, we're just having a simple tonic water. Could easily throw some gin, some vodka in it, but still in the morning, so we are going to just have a tonic water. Don't usually drink soda in the morning, but I'm that weird one that actually just likes the taste of tonic water. I had a craving for it, so I'm going to do it right now. And we're going to jump into this thing. So we are here, phase 3, the decision making. There's a lot that we've done that leads up into this. So if you've listened up to this point, A, thank you very much. I'm glad that you've been getting something out of this. And then B, this is where all of that work, all that effort gets put in. So if we just kind of rehash what this could look like, this really would take place over the span of really 2 weeks. To get from phase 0, where you've sourced, identified, to where you've screened, to where you've interviewed. Now you get to make the decision. So we're going to go over how to evaluate the prospect based on the information that you have. Why is it important to go through this full comprehensive evaluation? This is really going to test the true ability of an evaluator. This is hard, right? Not tedious as much as it is hard. Tedious is going through all the information to source. This, you are making an actual decision that in some ways could determine the fate of a department, an organization, depending on where you're hiring and who you're hiring. A tough decision is a good thing. That means you've interviewed quality individuals and you're going to have to make a decision that's really going to put these skills to the test. It also doesn't mean that you've wasted the time of everybody else. There are ways to soften the blow. So we're going to get into all of that. So let's get into this just a little bit. So when we talk about evaluation, there's 2 things that I want to go over: discrimination, discretion. Discrimination itself. So let's unpack that a little bit. It's an inherent part of the process. Now hold on there, right? We hear the word discrimination, and it's a word that definitely causes some hair to stand up on our backs. And I'm not advocating for discrimination. I'm telling you discrimination is part of the process for a lot of different reasons. And it's also illegal. It's not always intentional, but it is illegal. So the definition of discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people. So that could be anything. That could be age. That could be gender. That could be orientation if you're looking at that, which you shouldn't be for work. But again, this is stuff that's inherent to people's implicit biases that you can't allow to seep into the evaluation process. But it's not just race. There are a lot of different forms of discrimination. People are part of the process itself, and that's what makes it discriminatory, because our biases are real. Now, factor in you've got certain elements in a job description, whether it's for a really entry-level role and you're still saying that you need a college degree for something that really doesn't require it. That could, in theory, be viewed as a form of discrimination. If anything, you're limiting your own pool, but there is a case that could be made. So discrimination is an inherent part of the process, and it's up to you on the personnel side, HR compliance side, to be able to find ways to root that out and have a pure process. That is where discretion comes in. Discrimination, illegal. Discretion is what you should be using in any situation, especially on the personnel side. And it's important to understand the distinction. Whereas discrimination is unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, discretion is using individual choice or judgment within a situation. So how is that different? Discretion is looking at the entire picture. You're looking at everything you've gathered, everything you've cataloged, everything you've categorized with separate individuals, and you're making a decision based off of what you believe is going to be the best fit, and you're doing it based off of what's in front of you, not the other factors. An example, if we're going to use discretion as it relates to age, not hiring somebody just based off of their age, up or down, that is discrimination. Now, how you want to tweak and reframe that, say you've got, well, I can use a coaching example on this one. A benefit that I had was my age because I was a little bit younger, right? And I was relating to the players in a different way. If you have a really young team, right, we'll say middle school otherwise, it's not that hiring a significantly older coach, somebody maybe in their 50s, 60s, close to retirement, is a bad option. But you have to take into effect what's going to help the team be the most successful. Do you want somebody a little bit younger? Maybe they're transitioning to high school. Maybe this was a player who played in the program that they're going to be going into in a couple of years that had a really good run. Like, there's a lot of factors to look into when making a hire that fall within that realm of discretion that don't cross that line of discrimination. If you're just looking at age in a vacuum, that's discriminatory. If you're looking at, well, these individuals respond better to maybe somebody that's a little bit closer to them in this, and we don't think that this person who is outside these parameters will be successful here, and it might be harder for them to reach this group and they might fit somewhere else. That is what the evaluation process is about. It's not just about thinking about what you're going to get out of it. You need to take into account the person that you could potentially be bringing in too, because their success or lack thereof reflects on you as an organization. So you want to look again, where's this prospect fit? Look at everything from phase 0 until this point. All the information, lay it out, put the pieces together like they're a puzzle. I talked about an example from the YMCA when I introduced this whole thing. When I was making a series of hires for some openings that I had, I interviewed about 8 people. I think I want to say I hired 5 or 6 of them, all for various spots, but there were a couple of them I was interviewing for some night positions, and I had a couple of really good candidates. I'm just like, there is no way that I could put these 2 on nights. They would get eaten alive in the environment that we have. So one I hired in the daytime, another I worked internally to try to create a different position for them. Didn't exactly work out the way that I had hoped, but again, that is the evaluation process. If you've got somebody who you believe in, find a way to get them in, even if it's not the position that you originally interviewed them for. Most people would be amenable to it. Most people like that process, like the idea of doing something else. That's how I have the job that I currently have. I interviewed for something, and I ended up with something else because I was a better fit for it. That is the process that you need to have, because talent's talent. Talent is going to succeed and thrive if you get it in a situation where it can succeed and thrive. It's just up to you as an organization to figure out where that is, right? So by evaluating that initial viability, you also need to take a look at future upside. What is this person right now? What could they be if we get them in our ecosystem? Assess whether or not they're going to get the support they need to develop into that, right? If you've got somebody who's being brought on and you're going to be giving them to a manager that just needs somebody to produce, then maybe the development isn't going to be there, and maybe that's okay for them. But if this person has a lot of upside and you really think that they can grow into a role, don't put them with that manager. Put them with somebody who could potentially help them develop those skills to become an asset in the future. That way both sides don't get frustrated. You need to look at all these things. It's a detailed process, right? So understand that. Then go back down. Where does this prospect not fit? Look at everything from phase 0 to now. Again, with that YMCA example, I knew where some people weren't going to fit, and you have to understand that. And if you explain to them why you don't think that's going to work and propose an alternative, it could work. But where are the clashes, right? Is there an attitude clash, skill set clash, internal resource clash? Are there just things that aren't going to fit? Are you able to take that kind of a risk, right? Can you take a risk on a non-fit, and what are the potential ramifications? If it's boom or bust, you have to factor in what that bust could look like if there is no boom. And I don't advocate for organizations to take a risk unless you've got the culture to navigate it, right? You can get the most talented person in the world, but if they're not a fit, there's going to be problems on a lot of different spectrums. And if you don't have the culture to overcome that, it's going to tank a lot of the good things that you're doing, and you're going to have a really toxic environment. So measure if the risk outweighs the reward. If it's not a fit, don't convince yourself that it's going to work. Don't talk yourself into doing something. Sports teams do this all the time, especially during the draft. They get into a position, they fall in love with a player, and they know and they're very well aware of the flaws, but ego gets in the way and they think about that upside and think, we are going to make this fit, make it work, and come up with a plan. And so often that plan fails and you're stuck with something that didn't work, isn't going to work, and people lose their jobs as a result. So don't try to convince yourself that if somebody's not a fit, that you're going to suddenly make them a fit if you just get them in and you're going to just make it up as you go. Not how it works. Okay. The decision-making process itself. So you've looked at that. When you get into past evaluation, it's time to make the decision. Remember, talent acquisition, personnel, remove yourself. You've done your job up to this point. You have found them the person, got them to the interview. We're at the final stages. It is our job to inform and guide and get them into the last piece. Help the supervisors put all the facts together. Allow them to make their own evaluations based off of everything that's known. Remind them of the template that they set. Remember that advanced search filter in the first episode? Remind them of that and tell them that, hey, based off of your needs, this is my recommendation based off of that and what I have. Them making the decision holds them accountable, right? They can't come back and say that, well, they made us hire a person that didn't work out. No. We helped you get the information to make the decision. End of the day, you've got to make the hire. And we remove ourselves from that. And that's really how personnel works in most athletic settings. Your recruiters, your scouts, people who are directors of personnel in a specific realm, they give the general manager and the coaches the information. The coaches have to decide who they like and ultimately make the pick. And the general manager is the one that ultimately in most situations signs off on it. In this case, we're your scouts. We are your sourcers. We are the people that help the process. You got to put it together. Ultimately, the decision is yours. We can just give our guidance. And if you don't like what you've done, that one's on you. Thinking about the big picture, after an evaluation, right, if you come to the consensus that this isn't going to work, you're allowed to. Don't, just because you've interviewed does not mean you need to offer them a job. I know that sounds pretty straightforward, but a lot of times people interview, you don't have a good plan B. It's just like, well, they were good enough, we'll take them. Again, go back to what I said before. If you have to convince yourself it's going to work, it ain't going to work. So don't find yourself in that trap. Think about the big picture. Think about the employee success when making that decision. And of course, think about the cost of a bad hire. Think about the effort that went in, the effort to onboard, training, if this person is going to be getting benefits. Think about how difficult it is in some spots to actually fire somebody, right? If something doesn't work. And of course, the time lost when you could have had other people, other better candidates because you might have during the process. So think about all those things before you make your decision, up or down. If it's a good hire, you've won. If it's a bad hire, there could be a lot of costly things that come with it. So the final steps, right? So kind of back to this thing. A likable person does not equal a good employee. So you're under no obligation to just move forward with someone that you like. Remove yourself from the process on the personnel side. That's important. And guide people on the talent side. Set your board, right? This should be a constant process. There are going to be some people who are in the interview stage, some people who are in that final stage, and you're going to still be looking at people in phase 0 for different positions. Always let your prospects know the situation and give them the opportunity to ask questions. If you decline somebody and they ask for feedback, give it to them, right? Oftentimes it's going to be a question of, is there anything I could have done better? What was I missing? And you don't have to give trade secrets. You can kind of fluff it up a bit, but try to give them something that they can work on and don't just leave them dangling in the wind. That's a very low feeling for a lot of people looking for jobs. Is you interview with somebody, you hear nothing, and you just get the automated email of, well, we're moving on. Thanks, but no thanks. But you don't have to forfeit unnecessary information. So moving forward, all of this, so going from phase 0 up to now, it sounds a whole lot longer than it really is, but this should be done in about 2 weeks. And if you've got a good personnel team, and I've got a structure that I'm kind of working on that could kind of unroll that, it could easily be done, and you kind of pass people through. If you're working in personnel, human resources, which I think this should kind of be separate from it, but if you're working in personnel, talent acquisition, that is our job. literally our job. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, because you're really putting in some serious time looking for these individuals and trying to move people through the process. But if you think about it, 8 to 10 hours in a day, 4 or 5 days a week, right? So we're talking about 40 hours. If you're doing 30-minute screens, you're sourcing people, you're moving forward with interviews, you can kind of do this. And if you're looking at that 1 to 2 week timeline, it can be staggered. So you can move this all through. Keep the personnel staff the same through the process. So if you're the person that reaches out to do the screening, you should probably be the one that's doing that interview as well. And we can kind of go from there. Also, just because a candidate doesn't work out in the moment doesn't mean they won't work in the future. If you've got a really good interview, a really good candidate, that's a data point. Save that, because you might want to revisit that. That makes your process easier because it shortens it. If you have all that information of people, keep it all on file. The good ones you're going to remember, and even the ones that maybe weren't ready at that moment, they might be ready 6 months from now. And if they had a good experience with you, there's a likelihood that they're going to want to jump ship and come work for you again, or work for you for the first time, or interview again and then come work for you if it was a positive experience. So that's where that transparency comes in. Prioritize precision over quantity, right? The biggest mistake organizations make is we're just going to hire a bunch of people with this rapid fire microwave process. You don't want to do that, right? If it's a slow process, don't focus on the numbers, get it right. If you get it right more than you get it wrong, you're going to be fine. But if you do this quick microwave process, you're going to get a lot wrong, and then you're going to have to repeat again. And that is very expensive, and it's not a good way to go about personnel and hiring. Understand this model might not work for you. If you've got a really small team, 1, 2, 3 people, this might not be practical. This is really if you want to put a good hiring team in place. But in saying that, there might be pieces from this that you can adapt and take in, maybe with some of the evaluation pieces. Maybe it's going to be a different process, but some of what's in here, from how you're sourcing, where you're sourcing people, how you want to look at the whole picture of the prospect and really break it down so that you find the best person and not make that process feel so condensed. Take what you want from this, but if you want to take the whole structure, take the whole structure. Understand you're going to still miss on prospects and candidates. The goal is just not to miss in the biggest spots. Get it right more than you get it wrong, and allow the shell, the culture that you've built, to lift up some of those subpar or mediocre hires, because not all of them are going to come in and be great. And if they're not great, you're probably not going to get rid of them right away either. So you've got to understand that if you've got a good culture in place, things are running smooth, sometimes that can lift everything up, or it can mask some of what is going on in some of those other spots. Kind of just looking at my notes here, I've probably missed a couple of things. I mean, this was probably the most in-depth that I've done for a topic because it's spaced out over 5 episodes. But there's always going to be things, and things are going to change. But personnel is a serious, serious topic. And nothing makes me cringe more than seeing organizations not take it seriously, thinking that they can just get anybody in and make it work, and then wonder why they have a ton of problems. Not an entry-level spot. Personnel is the life of an organization. We are what's infusing the organization with new people. And it's not an entry point to HR. It can be an entry point to personnel. Like, you could be an entry-level specialist that develops into a manager within the TA or personnel team, but it should not just be the default, let's get somebody in who's never done this and just do it and then move them on to something else. It's important in sports because rosters change very quickly, and that's basically the genesis of my research, is why a personnel department exists, why it should have a similar structure in an organizational setting, and how it could be beneficial if you do it. So this kind of takes all of that and puts it into some audio. Obviously just not the whole comprehensive piece of my research. And this is a little bit different of a model because this takes a lot of organizational concepts that have already been done, some by me and some that I've taken from others, and just kind of puts it together with a little bit of sports. Whereas with my research, I'm taking sports and bringing it to an organizational setting. So yeah, there we are. And we're about to close this thing out. So as always, I appreciate the listen. Stay tuned for platform updates. There's going to be more that come out through the month of December. And of course, we've got a little bit of a rebrand happening that's going to give us a little bit more of a cleaner, inclusive look. As always, check out the other creators. And if you're interested in creating with us, I'm not a difficult person to find or get a hold of. And we'd be more than happy to talk about what perspective you find valuable and how it would be of value to us and how it would be of value to those who engage with us. So, as always, thanks. And we'll be back at some point. Have a good weekend, and I will see you next time.